This is Football Night in America, served by Applebee's.
Welcome into the FNIA podcast. We are served by Applebee's. You know, the Hall of Famer and Tony Dungy. We'll see Rodney this weekend starting in Kansas City and then in Dallas. So, Coach, let's start with this. You said this is the most wonderful time of the year. I'm looking right here at your words. What did you mean by that, besides Christmas, of course?
Well, Christmas is great, but I love this time because that's when teams start to separate. Everybody's competing for these playoff spots every week. Somebody's going to get knocked out. Somebody's going to ascend. And this is the time you want your team playing well and at their best. Let's look at last week, for instance. I'm thinking Detroit at home against Buffalo. Buffalo struggled the week before. Hey, Detroit is going to, and it didn't happen. Buffalo stepped up and said, you know what, we got to get this going. And that's what happens in December. It's playoff football, getting ready for it, and I love it.
Well, the Atlanta Falcons are one of those teams that's trying to play their best right now, and they make a big move. So Kirk Cousins is now going to take a seat. Michael Penix Jr. is going to get his opportunity to step in and play. Your opening thoughts on this move and the timing in which it came?
I'm really surprised, Jack. They battled through a lot of things. Kirk Cousins hadn't played well for a while, and I just thought they were going to stick with him, that you end up winning the game and make a decision we've got to change and recharge. It's great. They're going to give Michael Penix an opportunity, but we have to understand the number 2 quarterback during the season doesn't get a lot of work. It's not like, well, Penix is getting half the time, Cousins is getting half the time. Penix has not played, and he hasn't had a lot of practice time with the first group. Now you're going to throw him in there. I think this is a tough situation. I mentioned before we got on the broadcast, we did it in 1999, playoff year for us, but we were forced into it. Trent Dilfer got hurt. Sean King came in. Sean was fantastic. We won 5 of our last 6, went to the NFC Championship game. But this is a tough call, given that rookie primetime playing time when you haven't played all year and you haven't practiced that much.
Right, and they have who? The Giants this week, so you got to imagine they're thinking maybe that could be an opportunity for him to start with a win and go out looking good. And, you know, that may be the thought process here for Coach Morris.
I'm sure it is, but I'm a little surprised they didn't say, hey, we got a win last week with Kirk. We get another win, build on that against the Giants, and then go down the stretch. But something happened, something clicked them into saying, hey, we've got to go with Penix. And I'm sure they can see it in practice. I'm sure when he's running the scout team and doing some unbelievable things against their first defense, everybody's saying, why don't we put this guy in? I'm just a little surprised here in this crunch time.
Yeah, the timing in which it comes. So let's go to Patrick Mahomes. Speaking of these quarterbacks, so Patrick Mahomes, he has this ankle, and it seems like we have just seen this movie a time or two, Coach. At this time of the year, he has got the high ankle sprain, and it's right on time. But all reports this week have been optimistic in terms of that ankle, and it feels like he's been practicing enough to potentially go out and play. If you were coaching this team, what would be your advice? What would be your conversation with Patrick Mahomes?
If I were doing it just as an outsider, I would say, Patrick, we need to rest you up. We're playing 2 weeks in a row on short weeks. Let's rest you up in this home game and let you come ready down the stretch when we have to go to Pittsburgh and to Denver. But knowing Mahomes, he's going to say, no, Coach Reed, no, I'm healthy enough. We need to go out and win this game. We're still in it. Let me go. And it would be tough to not have that happen because I've been in that situation with a competitive, great quarterback in Peyton Manning. And if he says, hey, the doctors say I'm okay, Coach, you got to put me in, it's very difficult to say, no, I think it's better for our team if you don't play. And I think Andy's going to have a tough time saying that to Patrick. So my guess is, Jack, we're going to see Mahomes on Saturday.
I almost can't even imagine that he won't be playing in this game. I can remember when Coach Reed told him, you know, Pat, this is, I think, last year, a couple of years ago, you got to go in and get x-rays on that leg. And remember him slamming his coat on the sideline.
He didn't even want to take a series off to get the x-ray. Right. And so that's how competitive he is.
Yeah. And so now that his x-rays have come back with some optimistic news, this is going to be the hardest job in the world trying to tell him he can't play. And we've seen so many times where, yeah, it's bothering him and he's kind of limping, but when he has to crank it up to full speed to get away from a defensive end, he has no problem hitting that top gear. And so we'll see if it's still that kind of injury, that we've seen in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah. No,
All
I
right,
think
so
that's what's going to happen.
let's take a look at the AFC playoff picture here, Coach. And so this is what the AFC looks like right now. We got Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Houston. Those are the division leaders. KC obviously in position for that 1 seed. Baltimore and Denver and the Chargers. Now the Chargers have lost 2 in a row. That's the group for the wild card. What are you looking at with this group here?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, these teams can close out and clinch playoff berths. Baltimore, if they win this week, and Denver, if they win, they are in the playoffs. So these are huge games for them. Baltimore also has a chance to swing this thing around with Pittsburgh. Right now, Baltimore is the wild card position. Pittsburgh's the division leader. But if Baltimore wins, that flip-flops. And so this is a big game for them, Pittsburgh, and then Denver Chargers, same thing. Hey, 6-7 slot. I want to keep that 6 slot. If I'm Denver, I don't want to lose this game. Chargers, we've got to change this momentum around and get that 9th win.
Do you see any of these in the hunt teams, the Colts, Miami, or the Cincinnati Bengals, having an opportunity to sneak into that 7 spot?
I being from Indianapolis, I get the scenario every week from their local news. And these 6 and 8 teams, what has to happen? They all have to win out. They have to win all 3 of their games, get to 9 and 8, and then hope that one of these wild card teams gets to 8 losses. Well, as we said, Baltimore and Denver can get to 10 wins this week, and that shuts them out. Chargers need to win 2 out of 3. So their hope is get hot, win 3 in a row, and have the Chargers lose 2 out of 3. So they're all sitting there rooting for Denver against the Chargers, and then trying to take care of their business.
That's it. And the Chargers schedule gets a little light down the stretch. I know that the Denver game's tough, but it gets a little light from there. And that probably is the biggest issue facing them.
And I really think that they really have more of a chance of Denver falling into that mode. If somehow the Chargers can beat Denver, then Denver finishes up with Cincinnati and Kansas City. Those are not easy games. So Denver, to me, has more of a chance of losing all 3 than the Chargers have of losing 2 out of 3.
Interesting. So let's see Kansas City and Buffalo, their remaining schedules. This is what that looks like. So Kansas City, as you just mentioned, Houston, that's this Saturday, then at Pittsburgh, and then at Denver to close out the year. Buffalo has New England, the Jets, and then at New England. So they get New England 2 out of the last 3 on the right side of your screen.
Yeah, Kansas City would have to lose 2. Bills would have to win all 3. Now, the Bills look like they're going to win those 3 games. They're playing against teams that have really only 7 wins combined all year. So you have to figure the Bills are going to go undefeated. Chiefs can afford to lose 1. And that's why I would say, I'm going to keep Mahomes out. Hopefully we win this home game. And Carson Wentz, we've got confidence in him. We're playing at home. Our defense will be good with the noise. Let me have Patrick Mahomes if we need him for those 2 games on the road.
You think the Chiefs are good enough to win with Carson Wentz this year?
I do. I think they made a good decision signing him. I think he brings something to the table, same type of mobility. I think they would tailor their game plans for him, a little bit more zone reads, which will help the run game. I think it's a good signing, and I think he would play well if needed.
It's a heck of a backup to have in your back pocket there. Let's see who is eating good in the neighborhood. And this is served by Applebee's. So let's go over to the NFC, the top 3 seeds in the NFC. So that would be the Lions, the Eagles, and the Vikings, who all now have gotten themselves to 12 wins, the race for the 1 seed in the NFC. What's most interesting about this to you?
Well, the interesting thing is that you've got 3 teams sitting right there. I can remember the times that we were 12-2, and you feel like you're cruising. You're ahead of the game, and you talk about should we rest our starters or whatever. But now you've got 3 teams with 2 losses battling it out, and then we know that Minnesota is going to play Detroit at the end, the last game, and that could decide everything. So it's really, really interesting. But you've got these tremendous teams in the NFC North, and then Philadelphia on this winning streak.
I worry about the Lions, and I heard Coach Campbell saying all of his thoughts about he's not worried about all these injuries and all those things. But Hutchinson was their best defensive lineman. Lee McNeil was their second best defensive lineman. They went and got Carlton Davis because they were giving up too many big plays last year. So when you start erasing all these guys from the equation and the defense that had been so improved, and you're feeling like that's a strength now of that group, you look up and you go, man, where are all those guys that we were excited about? How concerned are you at this point about Detroit?
I am concerned. And, you don't want to have a game like that in December where you have a big game and you give up 40 plus points. That's got to be nerve wracking. But I will say this, our Super Bowl year, we had the same type of thing. We had a bunch of injuries. Bob Sanders was out. We're down defensive backs. We gave up almost 400 yards rushing to Jacksonville in the December game. We got crushed. Everybody said, well, it's over with. And I went back and said, you know what, we're going to get some of these guys back. But until they get back, we just have to know what we're doing, crank it up. We're not going to change anything. And we ended up playing better defense down the stretch and going to the Super Bowl. And so I love what Dan Campbell said. Hey, we're going to embrace this. We might win 2-0. We might win 45-43. It doesn't matter. We've got to win. And that's their mentality.
Well, he's going to believe. So let's see the remaining schedules then for these 12-win teams, Coach. So this is the Lions, the Eagles, and the Vikings. The Lions, they got at Chicago, at San Francisco, and then Minnesota. For the Eagles, at Washington, which can be a tricky game. Dallas, who's gotten better, and then the Giants to close it out. Vikings are at Seattle. Seattle's got a little desperation on their breath now, coming off that loss to Green Bay. Then they play Green Bay and at Detroit. So that is the lineup coming down the home stretch for the 12-win squads.
Yeah, you look at the Lions, that you figure they should win these next two games, even though they're on the road. That makes it a little bit tougher, but you're playing teams. Chicago's struggling right now. San Francisco dealing with a lot of injuries. So you feel good about those two. Philadelphia, division games against teams that would love to knock you off. At Washington, who's in the playoff hunt. And then Dallas, who would love nothing more than to hurt your playoff chances. So these next 2 weeks will be interesting. Vikings, tough road game at Seattle, and then Green Bay, who's playing tremendous football. But if these teams can win both of those games, that would set up Detroit at home against the Vikings. And man, that could possibly be for all the marbles.
I get the feeling like Philly's the team to beat in the NFC right now. A lot can change in a week, like we saw. You're feeling great about Detroit. All of a sudden, you erase these pieces in here, and maybe not feeling so great about Detroit. But Philly, to me, they still feel like the bullies of this conference. Would you agree?
I think right now they have the best defense in place. But I'll tell you what, Minnesota is playing well. They're playing with confidence. And then you look at a couple of Phillies games now. We saw them a couple of weeks ago where Jacksonville has a chance. Trevor Lawrence throws an interception in the end zone, and they hang on to win that game. So they played a couple of close games. I don't know who's the best team in this conference yet.
I'm with you. I just like the fact that Philly can come out and they can Saquon Barkley you, and you got to deal with that. They got this offensive line that's 6'8", 360 across the board, and they're pushing you around. And then all of a sudden they can have Hurts drop back, and they can hit A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on you. They got a multitude of ways to beat you and ways to play, and that typically translates well to January.
It does. And the fact that their defense, I think it's been, I don't know how many games since they've given up 20 points. And that really is saying a lot right now this time of year. Playoff time, we know we've got a defense that can go out there and lock people down. Detroit, we're hurting on defense. Minnesota has played tremendous defense early in the season, a little bit up and down now. I think they'll get back to, playing December football on defense as well. But Philadelphia right now just looks rock solid on both sides.
Yeah, they do. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right there in your hometown, coach. This Bucks team, they're getting hot. The Chargers have lost 2 in a row. Now they lost to Kansas City in a close one, and they really got blown out by the Bucks. It was 40-17, the final. What are you thinking with Tampa right now?
There is a lot of confidence in the city right now. There's a lot of confidence in that Tampa Bay locker room. And I'll have to say, they surprised me going out west to LA. I thought they could win the game. I thought if everything went right, maybe they can pull it off. Chargers leading the league in scoring defense, and the Bucks put up 40 points on them. That said a lot to me. Explosive offense. They're playing opportunistic defense now, and they believe.
Yeah, they're a bit of a sleeper over there in the NFC. It's a team that, they had a good run and they've had some down runs, and now they're getting hot again at the right time. Baker, I feel like he just always gives you a chance, and we saw him in the playoffs last year show that they can do some things. Do you feel like they can make a run, and if they do, what would that look like?
I really do think they can. They had a stretch where they had some injuries. They were not playing well in the middle of the season, but we have to realize now this team has beaten Philadelphia and they've
Yeah.
gone into Detroit and beaten Detroit. And so even though they don't have that great record, they have played toe to toe with those top teams. So they're going to be an interesting team come January.
Yeah, it's amazing what Mike Evans continues to do, and that stretch you mentioned when they had those injuries, that was when they were without their receivers, and it always looks
Yes.
different when you're without your best. They're on the outside, doesn't it?
Yeah, they had a tough time threatening people. They were falling behind. People were running the ball. Well, now their offense is scoring. People are having to throw, and the pass rush and the Todd Bowles blitz scheme is really taking people out of their element. And they're playing as well as anybody right now on this 4-game win streak.
That's good. Maybe we're going to take Sunday Night Football to Tampa Bay next year. We'll see how that goes. So our Week 16 notable games here, Coach. Let's go through these. We got the Broncos and the Chargers. That's the Thursday Night Football game, and that's going to be a fun one. Looking forward to that tomorrow night. Then the Texans and the Chiefs. That's on Saturday at 1. We will be there for that before heading down to Dallas for the Bucks and the Cowboys. But you got the Steelers and the Ravens too, which will be an awesome in division game. Eagles, Commanders, same kind of a deal, and the Vikings and the Seahawks. What catches your eye?
Yeah, I love these games where teams are in it and they're battling for playoff position. And this is what the NFL has to love when the games come down like this. Broncos Chargers is going to be fantastic tomorrow night. Chargers have to regroup. Justin Herbert banged up a little bit playing on a short week. Patrick Mahomes banged up a little bit playing on a short week. But these teams fighting for playoff position, and it's going to be really fantastic. One I have my eyes on, Steelers Ravens, Jack.
Yeah.
Everything
Yep.
tells you the Ravens should win this game. They're playing at home. Their offense is really hot. They've got a running game that can handle the Steelers' front. Steelers got manhandled a little bit by Philadelphia. They're playing on the road, short week. Should be the Ravens type of game, but the Steelers have had the Ravens number, and even Lamar Jackson has said, for some reason, I just haven't played my best against these guys. We've got to get it going. So that's a huge game, and I look for the Steelers to go in there and give the Ravens everything they can handle.
Coach, I've been a fan of the AFC North long enough to know the last time you want to play the Pittsburgh Steelers is coming off a loss. That is the last time you want to see them on your schedule. So I am with you. They are going to be looking for a fist fight, and it has always been a headache game for Lamar Jackson. Who would you pick if you had to pick that game off the top of your mind? Who would you like, Steelers at Ravens?
The Ravens should win this game. Everything logically tells you that, but I would not, if I were a betting man, I would not bet on the Ravens just because of the history and what the Steelers have done and the surprise packages that Mike Tomlin has come up with.
Do you think George Pickens will be able to go? I mean, typically hamstrings are not that quick, but he was out there running around and looking like it's possible.
See, we were talking about the Mahomes situation. I believe that's exactly what Mike Tomlin said. Hey, George, you probably could have gone out there and given us a little bit last week, but we're going to have this tough road game against Baltimore. I want to save you up. I want you to be ready. So he's had 2 weeks off to rehab, and I think he'll be out there and ready to go.
I like it. And then let's get to our Sunday night game here real quick. So this is the Bucks and the Cowboys. And you've said, on the FNIA podcast that Mike McCarthy, you would like to see him coming back and leading that team next year. And so what is it that you've seen that makes you go, let's stick with this Mike McCarthy plan?
The past 2 years, they've won 12 games. Now, they didn't translate that into the playoffs, but they were 12-5 team. So Mike McCarthy is a good coach. He's been to the Super Bowl, and this team has not given up. They haven't quit on him. So he hasn't lost the locker room, and you're a proven winner. Who are you going to go out and get that's going to be better? So I think we'll see Mike McCarthy back. And I'll tell you what I saw last week for the first time is that defensive front impacting the game. And Micah Parsons and those guys getting after things, getting the sacks, getting the turnovers. That's what they're going to need. They've got to slow this. I don't think they're going to stop the Tampa offense. But if they can create some short field position for their offense, get some big plays, get a couple of sacks. The one thing about Baker Mayfield, he's been super aggressive. He's been tremendous, but he has turned the ball over a little bit. That's what Dallas is going to need to rely on.
Yeah, and that was what was so tough about this year for Dallas is that some of those critical moments in the heart of their season, Micah Parsons was hurt, and then Zach Martin was hurt. So some of those guys that they're so used to relying on when they got to have those games, they were playing without them. And you're looking around, and then Dak Prescott's hurt, and so they just were losing pivotal guys. And that sometimes you just get bit like that in the NFL, and it happened to them.
And that's where they are right now, and that's why I think if they finish strong and they're competitive in these games down the stretch, Jerry Jones will say, hey, Mike McCarthy's a pretty good coach. If we get all his weaponry back and we get Overshown back and we get Dak back ready and healthy and DeMarcus Lawrence and, we've just had too many injuries to pin this on the coach.
Yeah. Good points. All right, well, we'll get out there. We'll see them firsthand. We're off to Kansas City on Saturday. We'll see you for football night in America. Really football early afternoon in America. We'll see about noon, about lunchtime there. Take you to 1 o'clock. Then we're off to Dallas. Coach, it's always a pleasure. Have a great week. We'll see you out there at KC.
All right. Yes, sir, Jack.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.